Hi there, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Becky Hopkinson, and I'm so excited to be presenting at this conference today that is hosted by the National Foreign Language Center at the University of Maryland, and also to be representing next fall as well as Walt from here in New Hampshire. Again, my name is Becky Hopkinson. My pronouns are she, her. I currently teach at Pinkerton Academy in Derry, New Hampshire. As you can see, my email and my Twitter and Instagram handle are here if you'd like to connect with me to talk more about what we will be talking about today. So today, the topic of my talk is using comprehensible input to empower students with social and emotional challenges. As you'll see throughout my presentation, I'm sorry if you hear my dog. This is just life when we are in a remote setting. I don't really have a quiet space that I can go to, so here we are. If you'd like a copy of my slides, you can scan that QR code. You're going to see them throughout my presentation because I tried to link up the resources that I use most. You can just hold your camera of your phone up and it'll link you to that resource. So if you want my slides, they're right there for you. Well, without further ado, let me tell you a little bit more about myself. You're able to read through all of these things if you want to learn more. But again, my name is Becky. I have a bachelor's degree in Spanish and International Studies from the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. My master's is in Latin American Studies, and I have a passion for supporting students with social emotional challenges, mentorship programs, coaching programs. Love all of that stuff. So if you want to chat, please hit me up. I also help to write and curate the newsletter for TCI New Hampshire, which is Teaching with Comprehensible Input New Hampshire. If you want to sign up for our newsletter, there it is. There it is. And also, I help to co-produce a TV show called Kelly's Quest, The Transnational Journey. And if you click this link here while you scan that code, it's going to take you to one of our recent episodes that we filmed at the beginning of the quarantine with an organization called Bagley, where my friend Kelly interviewed a number of youth who are helping to organize online events for LGBTQ youth, keeping them connected and supported during this time of quarantine. So really awesome resource, especially if you have students who identify as LGBTQI. All right, well, moving on. Well, before we go through my talk, I think it's super important for you all to know where I'm coming from as an educator. My philosophy is that my job, first and foremost, is to build a student's sense of self-esteem and their sense of belonging, and then hopefully accidentally teach them some Spanish along the way. So that is my philosophy when I step into the classroom. And that really kind of feeds into everything that we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be talking about students and mental health. We're going to be talking about how self-esteem can impede language acquisition. We're going to be talking about how you can use CI or comprehensible input strategies to really cultivate this environment of success where all students are going to feel supported and like they're doing a great job. Also, we'll touch a little bit on assessments. I'm still learning a lot about this area myself, so I have some of the things that I'm using regularly, my formative as well as my summative assessments. But again, this is an area that I myself am learning a lot about as a new teacher, so I'm open to all sorts of ideas. I'm also going to be this year doing a little bit more research on self-reflective journaling and self-assessment. So that's something I'm hoping to build in the future, but I'm not yet there. So hopefully get there. If you're looking for some awesome resources, I credit a lot of my success in the classroom to Tina Hargaden and Mike Pito. They're amazing teachers, have so many resources out, so if you want to check them out, they're amazing. Also, the CI Liftoff community on Facebook. If you're not in it and you're interested in CI, join. It is a wonderful, supportive community, and you'll get amazing ideas, so why not? It's a great Facebook group. I'm still learning how to change my slides here. Sorry about that. All right, well, confession time. I think it's important. As I said, you guys know a little bit about my teaching philosophy, but who am I? Well, I hated Spanish class in school. Hated it, absolutely hated it in high school. Took it in college because it was a required course. But in the summer after my freshman year of college, I accidentally studied abroad. I didn't want to go home yet. I wasn't ready to go back to, my parents' house. And so I decided to go study abroad. I did a 2-week course of photography and geography in Costa Rica. It was amazing. And different than how I was in high school, where I was like constantly in detention for not doing my homework or being disruptive in class. Only Spanish class, though, mind you. All my other classes, I was an A+ student. Just Spanish was just incredibly difficult for me. I realized when I was in Costa Rica that I had enough of the language to start communicating and to get my ideas across. And it was this wonderful moment where I was like, all this time I thought I didn't speak Spanish and I didn't understand Spanish, but like I'm doing it. I realized it was just this big game of negotiating meaning. It was incredible. So once I figured that out, that was when I was like, now I'm going to change my major and I'm going to become a Spanish teacher and it's going to be amazing. So when I studied abroad, that was when I learned that the way that I was being taught wasn't working for me. And when I decided to become a teacher, I needed to figure out how to avoid making those same mistakes in my classroom, because we all want to be the teacher we wish we had when we were in school, right? One more important thing for me to talk about, minus my dog who's whining and wants inside right now, is that I have generalized anxiety disorder. This is why I talk so much about it, and this is why I do so much work in this area, because I myself was that student, was that young person, was that adult who was just recently diagnosed with a disorder that has made lots of moments in my life a lot more difficult than they really needed to be. And so through learning about what my generalized anxiety disorder is like, I have learned how diverse those experiences are for others who have anxiety disorders. And I started to learn more about the difference between anxiety disorders, all the different types of anxiety disorders. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you guys as well today, because I think it's really important for us as educators to really get a grip on all of that stuff. So digging deep real quick at the very beginning, common anxiety disorders. These are some of the top ones that you're going to see listed when people talk about anxiety disorders. So things like a panic disorder, a generalized anxiety disorder, which is what I have, agoraphobia, that's fear of people, specific phobias, social anxiety disorder, PTSD, OCD, separation anxiety disorders. And I'm sure in your classes, the two things that you see most often are generalized anxiety and social anxiety disorders. At least that's been my experience as an educator. And so when I'm crafting my lessons and my activities in my classroom, I try always to focus in on making sure that the experience of these kids isn't going to be miserable, because these kids will immediately shut down, and it's very clear when they're not having a good time. And I'm going to talk about why it's really, really, really important for students to feel supported and loved and in a good mood when we're in language class. And, talking about anxiety and anxiety disorders, this book was so incredibly helpful for me. I really strongly recommend that you read it, but if you don't like reading big, long books, just listen to this guy's interview over here on Innovation Hub. So you guys can scan that, and it'll take you right to the Innovation Hub episode where Dr. Randolph Nesse talks about good reasons for bad feelings. It really goes into the evolutionary reasons for why anxiety and depression and all of these different types of mental health disorders exist in our society today. And it really helps make sense of a lot of things for me. So if you want to learn more about like why we get anxiety disorders and why the chemical imbalances happen and why sometimes they happen for really good reasons, check this book out. It's fantastic. Here we go. So when we're talking about our students in the classroom, we were talking about different types of anxiety disorders, but we want to also talk more largely about adolescents in general, because that'll help give us a snapshot of what might be happening in our classroom, even if we don't have the specific 504 or the IEP. So in all of the research that I have done, unfortunately, studies vary greatly. So they might say that it's only 3% of students experience anxiety in the classroom, where another study is going to say 97%. The issue here is that the studies are always going back and forth between diagnosed anxiety disorders and exhibiting an anxiety disorder. And then they get all tripped up in this idea of experiencing anxiety does not mean you have an anxiety disorder, because again, as Dr. Nesse states, anxiety is a natural response to stress. If you have a big test next class, you're going to be nervous about it. If your parents had a big fight the night before, you might be a little nervous coming home because you don't know if they're still going to be arguing. That's a normal response. Anxiety is a normal thing. But also, just because you don't have a diagnosis or our students do not have that IEP or that 504, it does not mean that there's no disorder. I was an adult just recently, a couple years ago, when I was finally diagnosed with my anxiety disorder. And this was even after years and years of therapy. Finally, everything started to fall into place, and I was able to say, yeah, this is so much more than just me dealing with things and being stressed out. Like, this now has become a big roadblock in me being able to live my life the way I want it. I want to live my life. And that's when anxiety turns into a disorder. And it's a very slow, creepy process that happens over a period of time for most people. So it's important to remember, just because there's no IEP or 504, that doesn't mean your kid has anxiety. So when you're developing your lessons, again, it's this idea of focusing in on the students you have diagnosed in your classroom, but also keeping in mind that other students will probably benefit from those supports as well. So you're creating activities, you're cultivating community in a way that everyone feels supported and no one feels singled out. All right. Even though all those studies could not come up with a single thing that they agreed on, and I've looked at tons and tons of them, the one thing that they all have in common is that they're saying that anxiety and anxiety disorders are rising amongst adolescents in the US. Now, people are going to say that that's because of social media and cell phones. It's possible. It really, truly is. There's a lot of things that could be contributing to that as well, though. So while we still don't know the exact reason why so many of our youth today are being diagnosed with anxiety disorders and are experiencing such high levels of anxiety in their daily lives, we know this is an issue that our students are facing. And so as educators, it's important for us to be thinking of ways we can do things differently to support everyone. This is a great Pew Research Center survey. If you want to take a look more at it, you're welcome to do so. But the thing to remember is this is a survey of kids 13 to 17 in 2018, and they were asked if these were a major or minor problem for people their age in their community. So as you can see, the top of the list here, we've got 96% of students are saying that anxiety and depression are either a major problem or a minor problem. So if you need any more proof, this is a very widely quoted study, fantastic research, and it just really drives home that it's an issue for all of our kids. So we need to be thinking about those as we develop our activities. Now, if we were in our real session, I'd be asking you guys, hey, what do your anxiety disorder kids look like in the classroom? Like, what types of things can you actually sense in their well-being or actions that they're doing, their habits, their body language, all of those things. But I'm just going to skip to this awesome infographic that I got off of Instagram that I love, because I think that this really does drive home the diversity of experiences that people have when they have an anxiety disorder. And the thing with this is these things all become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you are irritable because you have a test next period and you don't want to deal with it, so then you fall down a YouTube hole during your class about rabbits and cats or something, and then you realize, oh gosh, I can't focus, and now I have this test and I can't do this test, so then you avoid doing it, so you don't do anything during the test period, then all of a sudden the test period's almost over, so you rush through and you try to get as much done as you can, and then you get a bad grade, and it just cycles. Now you can't sleep because you're getting bad grades, and now you're trying to schedule yourself so that you can do better. Remember, anxiety is so much more than looking worried. Everyone deals with their anxiety in a different way, and it's really important for you when you're working with your students and the special educators to be like, hey, all right, so I know this student has anxiety, but can you tell me a little bit more about what this is going to look like, and what are the things that I can do to support this student? And this goes beyond what's in that IEP. There's going to be helpful tips in there. Reach out to your special educators, because they're working on helping your students to develop strategies to overcome all of these habits that, again, as I said, are self-fulfilling prophecies. They lower students' self-esteem. These anxiety disorder strategies will cause students to continually think bad about themselves and think that they're not going to be skilled. So it's important for you as an educator to be looking at these things. How do I help them break this cycle? Your special educators are working on it with your kids every day. So reach out to them for support so you can make your classrooms a more welcoming environment for them. And again, it goes to that idea of self-esteem. Our students with anxiety have low self-esteem when you compare them with healthy adolescents. And this will eventually cause us it causes me to want to find ways to build that self-confidence while I'm teaching them a language. So as I was looking for teaching strategies, I ran across this awesome theory by Dr. Stephen Krashen about the affective filter, which really focuses on how it's essential that students have a high sense of self-esteem and that they do not feel incredibly anxious. Because when you have low self-esteem coupled with anxiety, it's going to form a mental block that will impede the language acquisition. And it goes back to that self-fulfilling prophecy that they're not good at it but they're not good at it because they're not able to learn because they're super anxious or they're feeling like they're not going to be good. So thinking about the affective filter now as the big thing to overcome, not just for your kids with anxiety, but for every kid in your class. Now the game is completely changed, right? This was why I struggled in school. This is why I hated Spanish class, because my teacher, while she was building community with other students, she was totally leaving me out of the loop. And I don't know why that happened, but this is why I struggled in class. And so I'm going to be sharing with you guys some of the tips that I have learned over the years that have helped me to create a more loving and caring and welcoming environment for all of my kiddos. All right. Skip over some of these slides for today, but if you want to go back, you can always read them. Dr. Stephen Krashen again about the best methods for teaching language are those that provide comprehensible input in low anxiety situations that contain messages kids really want to read. So this, or really want to hear. So this should drive everything that you do in your classroom. Is my classroom a calm, supportive space? And is what I'm talking about really interesting to the students, or is it just what I want to teach? That's something that one of my coworkers tells me all the time. Do you really want to teach this, or do the kids actually want to learn this? Because when you couple those together with language that the students are able to understand, comprehensible language, you're going to help them to acquire this new language in such a seamless environment. It's incredible. So the way that I was taught raised my affective filter. I was front-loaded grammar rules, vocabulary lists. I was having all of my errors circled, my continual correction in class because I was wrong, and I was constantly feeling on the spot. So these things made class more stressful for me, and they make it more stressful for all of your students. These are all common anxiety triggers, not just for kids who have anxiety disorders, but for all students. So since language classrooms are such unique spaces, it's important for us to remember that everyone in our classroom can learn. Kids should not be failing. We need to figure out how to give the students a learning environment where they're all going to be able to succeed, so that they're going to be able to be successful in our classes. And what may seem insignificant to us is everything to our students. And these tiny changes that I'm going to talk about are going to have such big impacts that for my students at least, it's been a huge, huge game changer. And using comprehensible input helps me to build that self-esteem and community in my classroom. Again, if you're not sure what comprehensible input is, here is a slide that is all about it. You already do it in class. Think of yourself as the tour guide of your classroom adventures for the day. And then you wrap it all up in a beautiful write and discuss. Wait, you don't teach grammar? Everyone asks me this question. You don't teach grammar or vocab, but I do. I do it in like pop-up 5-minute lessons when I notice a bunch of kids making the same error. Sheltering your vocabulary and focusing on helping your students to use the language that they're learning. Telling stories, helping students to identify patterns, student-directed learning, all really cool things that you can do in your classroom. Again, student-centered comprehensible input is going to lower that affective filter because now you're lowering the anxiety, you're helping them feel more confident and relaxed, and so they're going to naturally learn more. So here are my favorite go-to activities. If you want more, just Google them because these are like tried and true CI activities you're going to see all CI teachers using in some form. Card talk, one-word images, and picture and movie talk. Whenever you do any of these classroom activities, you always will summarize it at the end of class in a write and discuss. These texts are where you're going to source what are new vocab words that we're learning? What are the words that I can start using more often in my classroom? That's where you're going to find them. When you want to do assessments, this is where you're going to pull those assessments from. They become like the journal of your class. Now, if you want to see what I did for one of mine during Coronication, you guys can pop over here, scan this. It'll take you to a YouTube video. And what's really important, I think, is normalizing errors in editing. You'll see in this video, I make tons of mistakes, and I have no problem doing that, all right? Card talk. Oh, and then personalized questions and answers. We're going to talk about what that is here. So card talk. Today's theme is sports. Draw me a picture of sports. So all the kids draw pictures. I collect them up, and it's awesome. And then I'm like, oh, hey, what is this, guys? Anybody like to play basketball? Why do you play basketball? And I ask all these questions again. I'm getting all of these question words in there. I'm using the word basketball 1,000 times. So by the end, they're all going to know the word basketball. This is all stuff that they're emotionally connected to. I mean, some kids don't care about sports, but they'll participate in some capacity, right? And I've got the future tense, I've got the past tense, I've got the conditional tense, all of these things. I'm not worried about mixing up the grammar. I just want to keep the vocab simple. Because now in our write and discuss for that class, we can talk all about Jenna and all the things Jenna did. And then if I wanted to do an extension activity, here you go. I can ask more questions. Who else plays basketball? Does anyone play on the basketball team for school? Who else plays a sport? And it goes on and on and on and on and on. I can easily take one picture and turn that into a full week of content, a student created picture. It's so awesome. So really look at Card Talk. One word images, you're creating characters with your students. Here's one of my slides that I like to use. What is their personality like? These are supposed to be GIFs, but I couldn't get Google Slides to work. Anyway, so I've got nice cats and angry cats. The antipatico cat is like throwing stuff off the table because that's what mean cats do, right? Or I'll ask my students when we're making up a character, what do they like? What do they not like? So we're creating these characters, and here's an example. Here's Roblox. Roblox, the book. I did this with my elementary school kiddos last year, and we wrote this story. They wrote it, they drew it, and I just put it in Spanish. Like, we asked the questions together in Spanish, teased it out. Sometimes we cross-talked a little bit, right? I spoke Spanish, they spoke English. But we eventually all agreed on this story about Roblox, the book. Here's another one I did with my middle schoolers last year. We were talking about Senor Bobbert. They were all excited about incorporating student loans into here. Where else would you be learning about student loans in middle school? But they sure made sure to include this as why he's super sad. So we created the story. Here's my vocab. Here's what we're going to do. Hey, here's a great assessment. Take this story, change it up, change something, make me a list of questions, all sorts of cool stuff you can do with the student created content. And again, it's stuff that your kids are all going to feel comfortable with. I stole this amazing slide and edited it a little bit from Mike Pito. It is a great way to very quickly write a story. So if you have something like Senor Bobbert here, you're like, all right, so we know all about Senor Bobbert. Now here are some questions. Where is he going? With whom? What's the problem? How do they fail the first time they try to solve the problem? And then how do they ultimately solve the problem? All the Sweet 16 verbs, so these are high frequency verbs that are important for kids to know, all my question words. This slide can guide my entire class, and I can easily write a story with 4 questions. So awesome, awesome tool if you're looking at creating stories with your kids. Video talk, showing very, very short YouTube videos and narrating them or writing stories about them, asking questions about them, reacting to them. This is one of my favorites. It's called Hola y Amigo. You can find the QR code there. Here's another one I really like. It's called El Closet, or Closet Space, I think is the English version of it. Little much for middle schoolers. Don't show it in middle school, but your high schoolers will love it. It's super dark. Struggling students, jobs are helpful. You can find more about this by Googling on CI Liftoff. Quiz Writer is awesome for kids who are super nervous about taking tests because then you can have them write the quiz questions. Note taker, of course. Artist, Teacher 2, it's kind of like a co-teacher, a lot of fun for kids who might get bullied a lot. Give them that opportunity to be in front of the class and have a leadership position. I find that that's a really awesome place for them to be. So some ideas here for you for incorporating students into the classroom in ways they feel really comfortable. For assessments, because now I have exactly 3 minutes to finish up. Assessments, I always try to focus on what kids can do and not what they know. So here are what I like to do for my formative assessments. Originally, I've been doing quick quizzes. Like I said, I have a quiz writer who writes like 10 true or false statements. Then I grab a couple of them, make sure they're not gotcha questions, and hopefully everyone should pass because they've been paying attention. But I started incorporating Senora Chase's templates into my quick quizzes, and oh man, they're amazing. Choral translations, I do everything in chorus. So all of my responses to questions are in chorus. All of the translations we do are in chorus. All the readings that we do are in chorus. I make sure that everyone as a group is doing the activity together. This means that every student who doesn't know or is too nervous to participate is able to still get the input. This helps me to target where are the trouble spots for my whole class so we can go back over them. And this also provides just more and more repetition and everybody supporting each other in the community. Turn and talk, take a break, have kids explain what's going on to each other in English or their L1. This really helps everyone to make sure that they're on the right page, provides a brain break, helps the students to support each other. And the results from all of this stuff is going to really help to inform your instruction. Mike Pito said that for your quick quizzes, it's a great way for you to figure out who to target tomorrow. Like, who do you need to make sure you bring more into the class tomorrow? Love that strategy. That's an awesome idea. Summatives, again, that idea of focusing on what they can do, not what they know. So summarizing a familiar story. So maybe last week we told this excellent story about my dog and I running into a wolf, or not a wolf, a coyote when we were out on a walk. So I'll tell that story again in Spanish and say, hey, all right, summarize that story we talked about. What story was it? Who were the characters? What was going on? Maybe have them translate it to English. So I'll have the text written out and then they have to translate it. Summarize another text that's on paper. Maybe we all read a news story the other day in Spanish and I give it back to them and say, hey, all right, we read this yesterday. Do you remember what this was about? I want you to pull out some of the key details. Again, helping them to focus on what they can do. Free writes are amazing. So there's another cool thing. If you want to do free writes, I do 10 minutes, and I've started to build in time for the students to edit, and that's been really helpful. Second semester, that's when I start doing a lot more speaking with my students, having them respond to questions. I do the Q&A game for speaking assessments. I actually, literally for my midterm, I let the kids record themselves doing the speaking assessment on their phones, and then they sent the recording to me. And they said it was the most awesome way for me to do a speaking assessment because no one felt like they were on the spot and everyone was mumbling. So no one was able to really key in on anyone. So I'm definitely going to be doing that from here on out. Don't know how I'm going to do it in the online environment, but I'm going to figure it out for next year. Here's what the question and answer game looks like from Tina Harganen. If you want to search it, she'll give you more information, but this is kind of how the game works. Here's questions, and this is how the kids get points. All right. And as I said, this might sound great to you, but you're like, I have a required book. Don't worry about it. Like, it's totally fine. Lead with these CI activities because these are going to generate text that contain the required grammar points, vocabulary, themes. And again, removing that teacher-driven stuff is really going to help your students to relax, for them to feel comfortable, for them to feel supported. And it's going to help the information stick more because it's conversation. It's being a part of this environment. It's being a part of this community. Pro tip, if you're thinking about jumping into CI, join CI Liftoff or your local CI group like PCI New Hampshire. Or if you're kind of in a desert and you're like, I don't know what to do, Sarah Breckley, who's an incredible Spanish teacher, has the great CI teacher locator map. So it's kind of like Tinder for teachers who want to talk curriculum and, you know, it's really awesome. So if you're looking for teachers in your area, definitely go there. That's how I actually networked and found out about the open position at Pinkerton. So really use this because you can make some really cool and useful friends. All right. So we're getting close to wrapping up here. I want to thank you all for today. I'm trying to put my video somewhere useful. That looks a little bit better. This is a little awkward for me, but I hope that you enjoyed my virtual presentation on anxiety disorders in the language classroom. If you want an e-copy of resources that I've curated, feel free to scan this QR code or you can grab the link there. Let me see if I can, I don't know why that bar is there. What if I zoom out? There you go. Now you'll be able to see it. So you can scan that QR code. If you want a copy of the presentation, my email is bhopkinson@pinkertonacademy.org. My Twitter and my Instagram @profehoppy. If you want to learn more, please feel free to reach out to me. 30 minutes is a really short period of time for me to kind of get through all of this stuff, but I hope you found this useful. Remember, guys, small wins are so important for our students, especially for our most vulnerable kids. So make sure that when you're working with your students as a whole, that you're keeping an eye out for those kids and making sure that you're developing activities in your classroom that incorporate those students from the get-go and help them to feel supported and loved. And that's going to help them to learn, which is amazing. Thank you all for being with me today. And I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful rest of your conference. Thank you.